everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on CPQ and subscription management. I'm Brian Friedman, the GVP of Sales at SoftClouds, and we're happy to have you with us today to learn more about CPQ and subscription management. During the course of this webinar, we'll be putting a couple of polling questions up at various times. Feel free to answer those. It will help us to understand what's important to you and where we could focus our attention on this webinar. And also, as we go through the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A. And my colleague Renee will run through those questions when we finish the content on the webinar. So let's get started and start talking a bit about CPQ and subscription management. So to begin with, let's talk about what CPQ is. CPQ stands for Configure, Price, and Quote. And it's a tool that's designed to help companies really get more quickly from quote to cash. And you'll hear that comment several times during the course of this webinar. What we're really looking for is a modernization of the process of putting quotes out, having conversations around the configuration of product or product sets, and ultimately getting to the cash or the close on the transaction itself. So at a very high level, what CPQ application does is it helps sellers create accurate and professional quotes. And the way in which it does that is it has all of the tools that contain all of the components in a transaction, whether it's a number of parts and pieces, or if it's different components of a configuration. The application itself pulls all of those different things together to create an accurate quote. It's allows for the collaboration between sellers and various parties to be able to make sure that quotes are accurately prepared and generated. And it really does give the customer a very clear understanding of what it is that they're being quoted for, what the various components are, and ultimately what makes up the final quote or the final estimation. The nice thing about a CPQ tool is that it really sits in between other applications. You'll see a reference to this a bit later on. We refer to CPQ as the middle office. So CPQ works together with CRM applications on the front side and ERP applications on the back side to be able to really have that full integration between the front office and the back office. You'll also hear a number of references during this webinar to integration with Salesforce CRM. And it's important to point that out because the Oracle CPQ product is integrated in a significant number of instances with Salesforce CRM. And we've done this many, many times. It's a very easy way to integrate into Salesforce CRM. It's a very transparent way for the users. They don't really know that they're going from what they're familiar with, which is Salesforce CRM, into the Oracle CPQ product. And in doing that, it really allows Oracle CPQ to be the preeminent tool for configure, price, and quote. So when we look at CPQ, we'll see that there's a tremendous number of situations where CPQ comes into play. Oh, sorry, folks. Let's do that again. So 80% of companies use some type of tool to generate proposals and quotes. And what they find is that using a tool can be 2x faster than traditional methods of creating quotes by hand or through other processes. It also significantly increases the time that new reps can come up to speed on the process of putting quotes out for customers and potential customers. And the quotes can be generated in sometimes 10 times faster than traditional methods. And we see this all the time when we talk to companies about implementing a CPQ solution, that very often what happens is their current mechanism of providing quotes is very slow. It's a very arduous process. Sometimes it takes the back and forth between a number of different teams to create the quote. And very often what will happen is if the quoting process takes too long, the customer moves on somewhere else. So we really see a CPQ application as a way in which the customer can get served more quickly and the company is able to be more accurate and efficient in the processing of their quotes for their customers. So when we look at the advantages of CPQ, we really see that it provides a number of ways in which business can be done better. The CPQ application improves accuracy, it boosts sales performance, and it reduces the errors. Because this is a machine-guided process, we're not looking at situations where potentially a salesperson or someone in the technical team makes mistakes. The various components that are utilized within a proposal are all tied together within the CPQ application. And in doing that, not only are the main components of a proposal in the CPQ application, but also any dependent components as well. So, for example, if a particular quote requires 10 different components in it, the application will identify that all 10 of those components are needed and put them into the quote so that some part or portion is not inadvertently left out. We can also use the CPQ application to increase transaction and deal size. And that's done because the CPQ application will identify what's being quoted and then suggest other things that can be added on to the quote itself. And so in doing that, we've all seen the situation where, for example, if you're buying something, you'll be offered an opportunity for a warranty or an extended warranty on that product. That's a function that a CPQ application can perform to be able to make that recommendation, which ultimately helps the company sell more products, sell more services than they would if it's just a standard quote without those types of recommendations. The other thing is that CPQ can really support a never-ending product set or SKU set, and complex pricing isn't an issue. We've seen a number of instances where we've done implementations where there's thousands and thousands of SKUs or thousands of line items in a quote, and the CPQ application allows that to happen very quickly, very easily, without a lot of repetitive work or a lot of reliance on tribal knowledge inside the company to make sure that all of the necessary line items are inserted. And in doing that, there's a concept called guided selling. And what guided selling really does is it says to the seller, if you're starting with a particular product or service that you're trying to sell, here's the various parts and pieces that have to be part of that. And it makes it easier for the seller because they know what they're selling and they're not inadvertently omitting something. And it makes it better for the buyer because they're getting clear, accurate quotations every time. And machine learning can be a significant part of this, both in the identification of parts and pieces that are needed for the quote, but also machine learning starts to gain an understanding of where a particular sale can be made in terms of a price point. And so as the CPQ application is used more, machine learning starts to make accurate predictions on how much discounting can be done in order to make the sale, or at what point might the sale be lost. As you can see here, in both of the Magic Quadrants, the Oracle CPQ product ranks very high in the product scope. So here we're looking at our first poll. If you could take a second to answer the question, we'd appreciate it. Okay, great. Thank you. Happy to see that no one is using a paper or manual process for their quoting. So that's definitely encouraging. Thank you. Thank you for participating in this poll. So moving on, what we have, we'd like to talk about several of the features of Oracle CPQ. The first portion is in terms of the configuration of products. And as I mentioned, guided selling is a huge part of this, which supports multiple types of devices, and it becomes intuitive in terms of the configuration. There's two different ways really to do the configuration of products. It can be done on a total piece-by-piece basis, where an entire product is configured piece by piece, or it can be done more in a bundled type of an atmosphere. And we're probably most familiar with this in making purchases of computers. When you look at different options for buying a computer online, you'll see a configured product with some options that are available to you. If you're very knowledgeable, of course, you can configure the entire thing yourself, but you really start with a basic configuration that gives you some options. And that's what a CPQ application is doing in the background, is it's enabling that type of a transaction. The pricing piece in part relies on that artificial intelligence that we're talking about, so that the system does begin to learn where the sweet spot is for the pricing on different products or product sets. And it allows also for dynamic pricing. So what that really means is that at any point in time, the seller can make changes in the pricing based on negotiations, based on discussion, based on how they feel that the customer might ultimately buy. And there's guide rails on that also, so that the seller can't go and place, for example, a 75% discount on a product without some approval process above the seller. And again, what we're looking for here is to try to maintain the highest degree of margin and profitability for the company, ensure that we're able to have efficient selling processes, and also to make sure that there aren't rogue sellers out there who are just selling product at any price without a real consideration for the cost and the margin associated with it. Once the quoting process is done, there is a process to go and create the actual proposal itself. And inside of that, what we're able to do is we're able to take all of the company's templates, boilerplate language, and incorporate that into the final document that's created by the CPQ system. We also integrate with different platforms like DocuSign, so that the entire process from the generation of the quote to the execution of the agreement can be done electronically. And as I mentioned earlier, all of this can be integrated with other platforms, such as CRM, whether it's Salesforce CRM, Oracle, Microsoft, and others. We can also integrate with various back office systems, as well as commerce and subscription platforms. And when you think through this, we'll talk a bit more about subscription in a moment, but the commerce piece is enabling the transactional portion as well. So in other words, we generate the quote, the proposal is accepted, and there's a payment mechanism that can be built into the transaction as well. And as I said, the CPQ platform is viewed as a middle office. So it integrates between the front office, the CRM, and the back office, the ERP, to be able to pull all of these components together and have and create an integrated end-to-end process from quote to cash. By doing this, it gives us greater flexibility, it shortens the sales cycles, and it allows for a much higher level of analysis in terms of how the transactions took place, how long they took, the discounting that was necessary, any and all components that are involved in creating a proposal and ultimately coming to an agreement. So now we'll move on to subscription management. And I think we've got another poll coming up here. So if you could take a moment, let us know if you're using a CPQ solution with subscription management. Okay, and what we're seeing here is a very even split of 50-50. So half of you are using CPQ with subscription and half of you aren't. So let's talk a bit about subscription management. In the old world, subscriptions really didn't exist. When we think back 5, 10, 15 years ago, subscriptions were things like magazines. Ultimately, Netflix came along, that was a subscription. Today, almost everything is a subscription. And what we're seeing is a very gradual, or maybe not so gradual anymore, transition from purchasing things to subscribing to things. And we can see this, that the subscription management market has grown exponentially over the last couple of years, and certainly is expected to grow even more so in the coming years. Part of this, obviously, in 2021, 22 was driven by the pandemic. People weren't going out to buy things, but they wanted things, and they started subscribing to things in greater volume. And we can see here where different areas or different components of the subscription economy exist. Anything from healthcare to financials. Consumer product is probably the one we're most familiar with, but also communication services, things like your cell phone, like your subscription TV services, etc. But all of these continue to grow and grow pretty rapidly during this period of time. And there's a reason for this. When you look at consumer behavior, subscribers expect that they're going to get a better price when they subscribe to something as opposed to when they purchase something one-off. And the other thing is that consumers tend to underestimate how much money they're spending on subscriptions. When you think about it, it's very easy to have these subscriptions and to just have things showing up on a regular recurring basis. It's anything from the subscription to Netflix or to other subscription TV services to consumer products. And we're just starting to see that almost everything now is becoming a subscription consumer product. Things that we normally would have gone to the store to buy now just get delivered to us automatically at home. And this does tend to run away because it's easy to subscribe. Sometimes it's not so easy to unsubscribe. So the subscription part of it is very important. And the big part, the big driver, of course, is convenience. So what happens with subscriptions is it can be used to build a long-term relationship. And if we look at this, it's really about gaining the confidence of the consumer in a product or product set and continuing to do business with this company. So it might start with one thing and then other products get added on. It's fairly easy using a subscription management platform for the user or the consumer to make changes, whether it's add products, change the date of delivery, change how the billing is done, any number of things that really can be changed or managed can be done directly by the consumer through the subscription management application. And what this does, this ease of use, really enables a company to build a long-term relationship with the customer using its products. And if we look at it, their old economy was big things were purchased. And now almost everything can be subscribed. So even when you're looking on the left side in that MRI machine, those were multi-million dollar purchases that are now placed into service on a subscription basis, which is either on a monthly subscription, so it significantly decreases the cost of acquiring that machine for a medical facility. And there's now even some usage-based subscriptions, which don't even look to a monthly billing, but really charge the cost based on the number of times that that particular product is used. And if we look at this, it just, everything now, we're starting to see more and more opportunities for subscription. Some high-end car manufacturers are offering their vehicles on a subscription basis. Tire companies are offering tires on a subscription basis. And that's even above and beyond the consumables that we normally think about, razor blades and shaving cream and hair products and everything else that you might imagine. So we're almost looking now, and one of the ways to talk to companies in terms of subscription management is it's a way to increase the reach of their product or services by moving from a one-time purchase to moving to recurring subscription process. And so when we look at Oracle Subscription Management, there's a large part of this that takes into account all the different components that can be viewed and managed using the subscription platform. But the real underlying component is it enables a company to have a full 360 view of consumer buying habits, deal activity, and opportunities. And in doing that, the company becomes smarter and they start to gain more intelligence into how their customers are reacting and how their products are being consumed. And what it helps to do is it helps for better planning and better visibility on the part of the company to know what products are in demand. If it's a cyclical product, they can start to understand that better. And they really have a much clearer picture of how their business operates, how they're generating the revenue, how they can grow revenue. So when we look at the Oracle Subscription Cloud, it's a very flexible product, and it integrates with the CRM, the CPQ, and the Commerce Cloud. And Commerce Cloud is an e-commerce platform that enables these transactions to take place. So when you look at putting all of these pieces together, it starts to allow a direct-to-consumer company to engage in transactions very methodically, and in most cases without a lot of human intervention, to be able to grow and expand what they're selling to customers. The dynamic pricing models is an interesting thing, and we've seen this with a couple of customers where we've implemented these products, that in order to keep a customer subscribing, there can be some dynamic pricing or different incentives that are offered for the customer to stay with the subscription. And we've all seen this. If you go and you look to possibly terminate the subscription, the service will offer you an incentive to stay, a lesser price, an additional product, whatever it might be. And all of this can be done using the subscription platform to be able to continue customers on the subscription to continue to generate revenue. So let's talk about the CPQ and subscription economy. Before we dive into that, I think we've got another poll question for you. So do you have any plans to implement a CPQ solution in 2023? Okay, so seeing kind of an even split here also, where we've got 2 that are definitely no and 2 that are maybe. And so for those of you who are yes or maybe, we'd be happy to talk to you after this webinar and see if we can assist you with your decision making. So as we look at CPQ in the subscription economy, what we're really talking about here is a growth of subscriptions, a growth of subscribers that have taken place over the years. Again, 21, 22, pandemic years, definitely some of this behavior was driven by that. However, because we have all gotten used to this, we've gotten very accustomed to our products showing up at our house, the subscriptions are going to continue to increase, and companies are needing to move to a subscription-based service to be able to continue to compete. And here you can see some of the different areas where subscriptions are highly used. Some of them obvious: consumer goods and retail, digital media and entertainment, education, software, travel. Business and professional services, that one's a little bit of a different nature, because really what we're talking about for a professional service is a company that's offering a service on a subscription, whether it's a monthly or an hourly basis. It's providing something that's normally provided on a fixed basis under a subscription. And so we start to see by looking at this list that every industry is being impacted by subscription. So when you look at the combination of CPQ and subscription management, you can start to see how they fit together in this situation, how they complement each other. CPQ allows for the easy configuration and quoting of products or services. It can tie into the subscription, which ultimately provides that customer 360 view. It does the continuous and recurring billing. It allows for automated returning views, and it also enables the company to have the customer, the consumer, managing their own subscription without the need for an awful lot of human intervention. And so when we look at how these go together, we're really talking about ways in which revenue can be grown. We list Salesforce CRM at the beginning because, as I mentioned, the implementations and integrations of Oracle CPQ significantly do tie into Salesforce CRM. And then if we put that on, we've got the CPQ, we've got the subscription, and ultimately that leads to revenue growth. And if we're looking at it, what the subscription-based pricing is leading to is usage-based pricing. And this is something that I alluded to earlier, talking about the MRI machines. But when we look at any of these large-scale purchases, it really can be done in a way that the transaction goes from purchase to subscription to usage-based. So let's give you a couple examples of where we've done CPQ and subscription implementations. One is in the pharma industry, and the other is with the global network infrastructure provider. So on the pharma example, this is a company that does clinical trials for new and upcoming products and drugs. So what they did is they had a very organized method for running these trials, but they had difficulty in managing to the trial process and the communication process with their customers. So they didn't really know how to quote each of these trials. There were a number of different components involved, whether it's a piece of equipment or an upcoming drug or whatever it might be. They found it very difficult in the quoting process. And so it caused significant delays from the time that they were contacted by a manufacturer till the time they were actually able to issue a quote for what their service was going to cost and how long it was going to take. So by bringing this together, they didn't have an integration between their systems. They had a number of different systems being used to pull these quotes together. They had a number of different approval levels that were needed, and it really caused for significant inefficiency in the entire process and transaction. So what we did in implementation of the CPQ and subscription management platforms is we gave them a very clean user interface that enabled either the customer to self-serve, to be able to come in and indicate what it is that they needed to have done and use the CPQ platform to build the quote or the estimation for the trial. We provided clear communication between what was happening at the company and what was happening with the customer, so that the customer was able to see where their product was once it got into a trial, and the company was able to communicate very efficiently and effectively how they were able to go through this process. And it resulted in significant cost savings, a significant reduction in time in the entire process. We eliminated all of the back and forth between different groups within the company in making these estimations. And it really just brought about a much better, cleaner process for them. Second example is a global network infrastructure provider. And this is a multinational company that has significant data centers around the world and extremely complex quoting situations. They were using a very outdated methodology to create their quotes. Sometimes quotes had in excess of 1,000 configuration rules, which would lead to hundreds, if not thousands, of lines in each quote. And it required the company to build enhancements every time they did a quote, because something was always different. There was no way for them to really understand how they were building these quotes, how they were going about creating the logic behind them, and the discounting was completely disconnected. So it was a very wide-based method of creating quotes, but it was very inconsistent and it was very inefficient. So in doing this, they were a Salesforce customer also, and we put all of this information within CPQ, the quoting methodology, the parts, the pricing, the configuration, and of course the documentation. And in doing this, we were able to take between the information that was stored within Salesforce, the information that was stored within Oracle EBS, use CPQ to bring all of this together, and it brought about a significantly enhanced quoting process. So in this case, we reduced the number of configurations from thousands to 45. We had a significant improvement in the performance so that there were fewer rule and data-driven solutions. It improved significantly their cross-sell and upsell opportunities. We had an email system to get approvals internally, and then externally using a signing mechanism like DocuSign to get contracts signed. The next step to this was by integrating subscription management, we were able to look at the recurring nature of every one of these transactions and automate it. So in this case, there are certain fixed costs on a monthly basis, and there's certain usage costs on a monthly basis as well. We use the subscription management platform to bring those together so that the company was able to generate their invoices on an ongoing basis much more quickly than they were able to previously. So when we look at the future of CPQ and subscriptions, usage-based pricing is definitely where we see things going. We'll get to a situation where customers pay based on what they use and not necessarily on the product itself each time it's delivered. And what this will really do is it will help to expand customer base, and it will help to engage new users because they're trying things. If they don't want to use it, they stop using it, they stop getting charged for it. We also see personalization in the user experience as being a big driver as well. We know that users want a very efficient way to manage to these things electronically or digitally. They don't want to have to call. They don't want to have to go someplace to buy things. They really want to be able to self-serve. And the more places that a user can self-serve, the more options they have really to work with a company to expand what they buy, to expand their experience with that company. And technology is moving very, very quickly in this respect to keep this personalization and user experience increasing. And the direct-to-consumer model will no longer be that unique. We really see situations where the things that you used to go to a store to buy are now direct-to-consumer subscription companies. Dollar Shave Club is one of the early ones. Casper, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I don't know that any of us thought we'd be buying mattresses online, but we are. And all of these different products are moving out of brick and mortar and moving more towards a direct-to-consumer omni-channel strategy. And I think it becomes harder to stand out. Every time we watch a show on TV, there's a new product that's out there competing with an existing product. And if we see all these new entrant products, you just know that they all need some way to stand out, to differentiate themselves from the others. And so they're going to look for more ways to do this. They're going to look for simplicity in delivering the product to the consumer, in managing to that delivery, and finding different ways to stand out to get noticed. So futures on subscription, we see that subscriptions are starting to evolve into variable plans. So rather than traditional month after month, they become variable. And sometimes the usage part of that does play into that as well. The more you use, the more often you need the product. We're looking at omni-channel engagement. So broader channels to engage with customers, to reach out to customers, to really find those customers where they live. And automation, which is really where we look at operational efficiencies, where we see the value of CPQ, subscription management, and Commerce Cloud, and bringing these together with a CRM system to really gain the intelligence that a company needs to know their customer, to understand their buying behaviors, and to help serve them more products or services that will help increase revenue. So just briefly, in terms of our offerings, we run the gamut for all of these different applications, from a systems analysis, looking at your company, looking at your processes and helping to provide some ideas on how to improve your business processes. We can assist with pricing design, integrations between various applications. We have migrated some systems such as CPQ from on-premise to cloud, UI enhancement, reports and dashboards, and ongoing maintenance. So all of these different things are services that SoftClouds can provide in any of these different areas. And we really just see this, that subscriptions are the only business model that's entirely based on the happiness of your customers. With that, thank you for listening. Renee, do we have any questions?
Yeah, Brian, looks like we have a couple of questions. Let's see here. The first one is, we have an extremely complex quoting system that's managed by Excel spreadsheets and macros. Is it possible for us to migrate to a system like CPQ?
The overwhelming answer to that is always yes. We see this very often in scoping sessions that we do with companies that are evaluating CPQ solutions. Many companies have grown significantly by fairly complex quoting systems where they are able to generate quotes and they don't see the reason to modify what they're doing in order to come to a more efficient way of doing business. The example I gave of the data center, they would generate quotes that were thousands of lines long. And we showed them how it could be done much more efficiently using CPQ. We also work with some very complex equipment manufacturers who envision that they have thousands and thousands of parts and pieces, but in reality, every item doesn't need to be a separate SKU because more times than not, parts and pieces go in conjunction with each other. So by looking at that logic, we're able to bring down the number of lines, the number of SKUs, the number of configurations necessary. So the long answer to the short question is almost any company that's doing configurations, even if they're very complex configurations, are ideal candidates for the CPQ platform.
Great. Thanks, Brian. So it looks like we have a question. Let's see here. We're a software company. How can CPQ with subscription management help us?
Great question. We actually have a use case. We didn't bring it out here today, but we worked with a software company that went from selling the software itself to migrating to a subscription basis. The first step was we utilized the CPQ platform to help them bundle their software and also to increase the upsell capabilities of the software that they were selling. When software was being sold as software, it really was much more, a customer would call up and they'd say, oh, I want the Word application. And that was the end of the transaction. But by using CPQ, we were able to do guided selling. And the rep who was on with the customer was able to suggest other adjunct products that would be beneficial to use in conjunction with the core product that the customer called for. Migrating that business now to subscription, we've been able to take it even a step further now that most software is SaaS provided. It becomes a subscription model as opposed to actually buying software, downloading it onto your computer. You're using a cloud-based service, which is done on a subscription. And most likely, some of those will start to move to a usage-based model in the future as well.
Okay, third question. Do you have any use cases where CPQ can enhance our bottom line revenues?
Almost every one of those instances where we implemented CPQ, it does enhance the bottom line revenues, and it does it really in several ways. One, it takes away the complexity of quoting. So it's just time from quote to cash is significantly decreased. Second, it takes away a lot of the manual processes. So the inefficiencies in creating quotes go away. We get rid of mistakes. We also get rid of perhaps some rogue discounting or situations where product is sold for less than it could have been sold for. And another one is just the ability to have more efficient quotes generated. So if we're able to do an efficient quote process, it also allows us to suggest other components that could be added So there's an upsell capability, and the revenue per transaction increases as well.
Great. Last question, Brian. We're a wireless service provider. How can we use subscription management?
Great question. When you go out and you subscribe for wireless services, there's always a multitude of different options available. And all of those are really coming from a CPQ platform. So you'll be offered anything from an extended warranty to replacement value to international calling, international text messages, any number of different options. Those are all coming from a CPQ platform. And the more different options that a customer is offered, the more likely they are to take up one or more of those, thereby increasing revenue, increasing the opportunity for longevity and stickiness with the customer. So definitely a market that has embraced CPQ and continues to use it quite efficiently. And I guess if we have no other questions, that concludes our webinar for today. We have a last question here. If you'd like to be contacted, let us know. We'd be happy to reach out and talk to you about our CPQ solutions, how we have done this in the past, and review what you're doing, and potentially give you some ideas on how to use CPQ and subscription in the future to better your business. So feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on the screen, and look forward to talking to you and hopefully doing some business together. Thank you all very much, and have a great day.